What's up, everybody? We are back. It's new year, new show. Oh, whoa, we're getting feedback. You have your mic on or something?
No.
Let me see to make sure. Wow, that was loud. Holy crap. Technical difficulties at the very first show of the year. That's awesome. That's awesome. How's everyone doing? I hope you guys had a safe and fun and drunk holiday. I hope you enjoyed it, because I didn't drink as much as I thought. Like the last couple times I've had like a long stretch off, it's like, yeah, every night I'm pretty much buzzing, but I wasn't. I had a lot to do, so I wasn't as buzzed as normal. Hey, Eric. Hey, Bob, Tommy, John, Melissa, Tiffany. Oh, I love to see you guys back. That's awesome. Tonight we're gonna have fun. We're gonna get into a different kind of subject. We're gonna talk about parapsychology with an actual parapsychologist. Holy shit. Not a fake one. And we're gonna talk about that too. So let me go over the rules. Let me find my rules here. I switched things up a little bit. I put them on that side. Or that side. Oh, it's backwards. I screwed that up. Anyway, so the rule. I'm usually pretty good. You know what? When we do 3TS with Dave and Tim, I'm usually really good at pointing at what side we're on. And it's been that 2-week vacation. I'm screwed up. So anyway, the rules. Rule number 1 is you are welcome to ask questions. I changed that. Usually it was like paranormal questions, but you can ask questions because we're going to expand out of the paranormal and just do different kinds of subjects this year. You can ask whatever questions you want. I might know the answer. I might not, which goes into rule number 2, is that I don't know everything. And usually the guest doesn't know everything. So if we have time, we'll look it up and we'll all learn something together. And if not, I have my trusty notebook here, new one for the new year. It's got Bigfoot on the cover. But I will write notes down and I will get back to you on your question. Rule number 3, we follow the Patrick Swayze rule here. Be nice, or Donna will boot your butt. That's the new addition to the rule up on screen. Yeah. So be nice.
I don't want to have to boot you.
You can have discussions in the chat room. That's cool. You can have debates. You can disagree. That's cool. But when it comes to, if it gets to like name calling and threats or something stupid, then Donna's going to boot your ass. Basically.
Don't worry. I'll give you a little like, hey, watch your shits.
Or if you just, for some reason, a user comes in with like a Russian name and starts posting porn links, we'll probably boot you too after I save the links. It's funny, we can hear our guests laughing in the background. So rule number 4 is if you have a question for myself or the guest or both of us, please put a Q in front of your comment. And that way it helps Donna out and pick out the questions. And likewise, I removed it, but if you have a statement, like really good statement that has to do with the topic at the time, then feel free to put an S, capital S in front of it, and then put your comment. And then lastly, number 5 is drink up. That's my favorite rule. I love it. I live by it. Oh, I'm naked. Look at that. What the hell? Oh,
you did it.
Actually, I got to switch to my special guest one. Because here we go. We're going to bring on our guest, Loyd Auerbach. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Loyd.
Doing okay, thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We probably had a happier New Year than you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had mentioned to Kenny that I was sick between Christmas and New Year, actually through New Year's. So I watched TV. That's what I did on New Year's.
Yeah. I mean, I unless we actually have plans, which I don't like doing, because like a day off, if I actually have a day off, I'm lazy as hell. Like I sit in front of TV, I play video games, I drink because that's, basically what I do. Sometimes I read a book, but it's like when I have to work or I know I have deadlines, that's when I get like all crazy and busy and I'm like, oh, I got to do this and I'll do this and I'll do like 5 things at the same time. I don't know. Anyway, so for people that might not know who you are, or maybe they only know you by name and maybe they saw you in passing on a TV show or something, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I'm Loyd Auerbach. I am a parapsychologist. That's one of actually, technically, I have a portfolio career. I have to say that I do more than one thing.
Cool.
Um, I'm a parapsychologist. I've been involved in the field since I started graduate school. I count that as my start in the field since 1979. We actually did have an accredited graduate parapsychology program at a university here in the Bay Area, which I attended, got my master's degree in parapsychology, and have been in the field ever since that time. I focus on education in parapsychology, as well as I'm probably best known as a ghost guy or ghostbuster type for that, partly because of the movie, actually, publicity that came because of the movie in 1984. I've written a number of books on the subject or co-authored a whole bunch. Thank you. And I've had a lifelong interest in this subject, actually, as well. My undergraduate background's in cultural anthropology from Northwestern, and I focused on quite a bit on looking at magic and supernatural beliefs around the world.
Okay.
Which gave me a good background in this subject matter and folklore and such. Also, one of the parallels to that career has been as a mentalist and psychic entertainer, former magician. Actually, was a professional magician pretty much starting in grad school. I learned magic and started performing right away. Although in the 80s, if you were looking for me as a performer, I would be Crazy Lloyd performing at comedy clubs. I switched over to mentalism, kept the humor. I'm known as Professor Paranormal in the mentalist in that world. That's how I've been performing. And I'm a past president, actually, of the Psychic Entertainers Association. I was president for 5 years for that, it's an international organization of some of the top mentalists and psychic entertainers in the world.
Wow.
Aside from that, I grew up in a television family, so I have a lot of insight into the way TV shows are made. I've been in hundreds of shows myself, but because my dad was a producer for NBC, my uncle was a director for CBS, and then I had a skeptic uncle who was a radio newscaster for a WMCA radio in New York. I kind of grew up in the industry, one might say. And the last thing I'll mention is also I got a certificate as a professional chocolatier in 2009.
Well, now screw all the parapsychology.
I figured that might change the tone of this. Yeah.
What is that?
A chocolatier, is that like an official diploma from like Hershey's? Where
it was a school. It's a well-respected school called École Chocolat in Vancouver, British Columbia. And a chocolatier is someone who takes and blends chocolates, makes things like truffles and bars and things, as opposed to a chocolate maker who starts typically with the beans and goes from bean to bar.
Wow. We got to get together. We got to have you over here one night. And
sure.
You and Donna can get together because she loves to bake. And I will just drink and observe and do commentary.
That's awesome.
We'll do a whole video. We'll just do a live stream.
I've actually done a couple of truffle making workshops, kind of like webinar type things, teaching people how to do basic French truffle.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, that's great. I mean, you have a really very varied background, which is really cool. I love that. I love when people have just a background that just has almost like a bard, you're just a little bit of everything. And that's great because you get experience in different fields and you see different things and you can carry that experience on to other things that you do. So we have a bunch of questions already that I saw going by, but the first one I want to get to the first and just let's get this out of the gate. Parapsychology. What is it? Like a basic definition. What is it? And then what is it not?
All right. So parapsychology is the study of human experiences and phenomena involving human consciousness, where information is transferred without the use of the normal senses or logical inference, or for that matter, intuition, which is not really psychic. The idea that the mind consciousness can affect matter and energy directly without our hands and tools and such. That's called psychokinesis, of course. And then the concept of consciousness surviving bodily death, which we just call survival, as the kind of a shorthand for that. So that would include things like near-death experiences, mediumship, apparitions, certainly, and so on.
Okay. Is there anything that it's not like from?
Yeah. So what it's not. It's not UFOs. It's not cryptids.
Okay.
It's not Atlantis. Lost lands and lost cultures. I mean, we do bring in look at shamanic traditions, because sometimes you see psychic functioning in that kind of context as well. It's not technically the occult in any way, shape, or form. We don't typically deal with demons and religious phenomena or mythological stuff. We're really looking at the human experience itself and looking for those patterns underneath that.
So it's definitely more focused on the human is the basis, basically.
Right. Well, I mean, the whole idea here is that ESP, psychokinesis, those things indicate that that we've actually limited ourselves in our definition of what makes a human. And the idea is expanding that. And we've learned that in looking at perception in general. The idea that people can learn to echolocate is not an example of ESP, but it's an example of biological diversity and what we're capable of should we actually go that direction. So we're trying to look at the limits of human consciousness and the limits of human beings and kind of push that boundary.
That's there was man, I'm totally having a brain fart here, but there's a Marvel movie coming out.
Echo.
No, not Echo. That's that the character Echo. I know who she is. Morbius.
Oh yeah,
Morbius.
Yeah, the living vampire.
So I'm waiting because you just said that about talking about echolocation. I can only imagine that there's going to be an uptick in claimed cases or claims after that movie comes out, or even maybe starting up, because I mean one of his big superpowers. Do you see anything
it's not a superpower. I mean, human beings can learn to do that. That's a biological thing. That's not
I've seen blind people do that with clicks, like they're something like that, where they learn to do that, and that's interesting. I mean, that now, do you consider that an extrasensory kind of? No, just a regular I
mean, basically one of the issues here we're looking at is that when we're talking about, the first thing that's important is knowing the difference between sensory and perception. Because those are not the same thing. We learn that in the magic world very clearly, and people in psychology learn that as well, that we're taking in data all the time through our physical senses. And what we call our five senses are actually more than that. There's multiple senses of taste, multiple senses of touch. In fact, there's variations on looking at sensory experts as to how many senses we actually have in terms of physical structures that give data to the brain that gets interpreted as our perception of the world. And not everybody necessarily perceives the world the same way.
Right.
We learn things culturally, we learn things environmentally. All those things affect our perceptual expectancies and how we perceive the world. So there's a science of this, and there's discussion about other senses. I think it was Discover Magazine a few years ago did something labeling 10 senses that human beings have, not perceptions, but senses, including they were counting the sense of duration, because we have a body clock. So that's a bodily thing. They were even counting a sense of beat, or one might call it the sense of rhythm. And apparently not everybody has a sense of rhythm, as we know.
I have it. I totally have it.
So, what we're looking at are those elements where information is coming in that is not getting sensory leakage or other things. But when it comes down to it, we're also learning what gets mistaken for psychic quite a bit. We've learned, and this comes in, especially in the ghost hunting world as well, that low frequency sound can vibrate your eyeball and cause you to see shadows out of the corner of your eyes. That's not a psychic thing.
About that, right? Infrasound.
Yeah. Ultra infrasound. Yeah. And that's something that actually was first published to the general public, more or less, in a parapsychology journal in 1998. And that researcher, Vic Tandy, actually found the example and actually definition and explanation of that from a NASA report from 1974. Wow. So you sometimes have to dig in really unusual places, and we're always doing that. We're looking at how magnetic fields affect people, which is not necessarily certainly not a psychic thing, but there are many things that can make us think we're psychic. And a lot of that is something we're trying to eliminate in the laboratory. as when we do experiments.
That's cool. That's cool. We're Kenny something the next remote viewing. Thanks, John. All right, so let's. And that's great. Do you want to get some questions? Do you have questions set up? All right.
Here's one. I'm skipping ahead, so don't yell at me, guys. But it's
how many senses do you believe actually exist? Just the 5 or up to 55, like one person believes, or somewhere in between?
Well, first, it depends on how you define sense, but I would say more than 5 and less than 55.
yeah.
Okay. Because I remember reading it, and I'm not going to even attempt to be factual on this because it was a while ago that I read up on this. But yeah, it's definitely more than the 5 senses, because I mean, we grew up. I know for me, that was basically tribal knowledge. You grew up with this basic understanding, this basic school system understanding where you have 5 senses. And when you really delve into it, it expands to a lot more. I don't know if it goes up to 55, but it goes a lot more than 5.
Well, there's right off the bat, there's a 6th sense. It's our sense of balance. We have a structure in the inner ear that allows us to position ourselves in space. Yep. That is a sensory organ that provides information to the brain. Technically, that's a sense. That's the 6th sense.
Yeah.
My late colleague, Martin Caden, used to say, and then there's the 7th sense, which is sense of humor. And, that's a whole different thing. That's not really a sense. Then we get into common sense, and that's,
not so common.
Right.
All right.
From earlier.
Okay. You live in California?
Yes, I live outside of San Francisco.
Okay, cool. Okay. What else we got here? What was some of the coursework or course titles you completed for your parapsychology degree, and does that university still offer that degree?
All right. Second part first. The answer to that is no. That was John F. Kennedy University, which is at the beginning of last year, is now part of National University. JFK's program ran from 77 to approximately 1987. I think we graduated last student probably 88. And I'll tell you honestly, it failed because we had a new university president who did not last very long, who was not happy with us politically. And we had some outside funding that unfortunately fell by the wayside because of Reaganomics. In terms of the coursework, if I can remember I don't have my transcript in front of me, so I'm going to go off the top of my head. We had 4 courses in research methods. So 3 of them were actually laboratory based. One of them was field investigation, field work based. We had a course in psychology, a couple courses in psychology, a statistics course, physics and parapsychology course, a course called Creation of Illusion taught by a local magician, which actually what got me into magic, in fact. We had courses basically bringing other disciplines, biology and neurology and parapsychology, taught by someone in that world as well. A course on theories and models of psychic functioning. It was a full spectrum, and they were heavy on science, very heavy on science and scientific method. We did have a couple of fluff courses too, but most of those were just direct in that. And then I ended up, when I was away from the university for 2 years after I graduated, working at the American Society for Psychical Research in New York, came back out and started teaching in some of the parapsychology classes. And I ended up teaching that Creation of Illusions class. I taught a fun course on Exploring the Unexplained, which was right in your bailiwick, Kenny. It was a skeptics course, looking at Atlantis and lost lands and all the other stuff pretty heavily. So, I ended up teaching a bunch of the field investigations class and some other things as well.
Very cool. Very cool.
Very nice.
Aaron. What's up, Aaron? He's a good friend of ours. What was it like working together on your course you two taught together? Loyd, love your course and books. Thanks. Any public speaking events on the East Coast soon?
Well, from my perspective, it was great working with you, Kenny.
I fucking hated it.
No,
I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
We paid you to say that.
And you didn't even have to grade the papers, so
I know that was great. I just got to make comments.
Yeah, that's right. You didn't do the hard work, the heavy lifting for the course. It was good. It was a really good experience for me. I know I learned a lot from you, and hopefully you learned something from me. And
yes.
I know we got really positive marks for the evaluation. I just talked to our executive director, John Kruth. And for those of you who don't know, I'm one of the regular instructors at the Rhine Education Center for the Rhine Research Center. That's the legacy of the old Duke Parapsychology Lab. So this was a course we wanted to teach, and thankfully Kenny was willing to teach it with me for that.
Right. I thought it was. Go ahead.
No, go. I was going to answer the second part, but you go ahead first.
I thought it was a really, really good experience because it's like it's one of those things where like we've always talked about it on this show, and whenever I do public events or whatever, I'm not against people. Like there are no sides to me. We are working together. We should work together. We should try to come together and learn what the other person believes, what they think, why they think that, and then see if we can work together to solve a mystery. That's my purpose, to solve a mystery. And being able to, when you reached out and asked if I wanted to do it, I didn't hesitate. I was like, yeah. And then I thought about it later. I was like, you know what? I bet some people would definitely, in my position, they would hesitate because it's like, well, why are you going to, co-teach a class with a parapsychologist at the Rhine Institute who's all about parapsychology? Why are you doing that? Because the only people that are going to sign up for that class are people that are believers or something. And I'm totally, making up a hypothetical situation, but why would you do that? And it's the experience. Like, why not? Why not? Because we knew each other at first because I actually reached out to you for one of the articles that I was doing, and you had mentioned that you used some of my articles during some of your classes, and I was like, holy shit, wow, that's pretty cool. And then we talked some more, and doing that course, I really got to know you more, and any kind of like, I guess, preconceived ideas that I had about you were either completely destroyed or solidified. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that in a good way, because I got to work with you, and you don't know somebody until you work with them, and I got to see how, you have a reputation, I guess the popular reputation, the well-known reputation as the parapsychologist. You are the guy out there on ghost hunting shows when I see you guest star or on stuff, and it's like you're the positive voice. But you got a pretty skeptical attitude that I found, that I was pleasantly surprised about, because some of the things that you taught and the comments that you made, especially because I have a habit of like talking and then doing a side comment where it's like, oh yeah, we're doing this, but it's not really true. And then keep going. You were doing a little bit of side comments where I was like, holy shit, like, all right, I like this guy. Okay, he's cool. I like it. So I really enjoyed the course, and I enjoyed doing my part, which was pretty much doing what I usually do. And it was good. And then I have ideas for future courses. But yeah, it was a really good experience for me. So
that's good, because you're on the schedule for next fall with me. I will say that, and I've told my students all know this, and I've been teaching this subject for a long time, and it never seems to make the media, which is really unfortunate when they do interviews, but I call myself a situational skeptic.
Yeah.
Because yes, I might accept the phenomena and the experiences people have as psychic in that label because of the evidence I've seen and the research that I've seen. But every single case I deal with, it's got to be approached from what's really going on. It's the mystery that needs to be solved. And you mentioned, you love solving mysteries. That's why I'm in this. So it really needs to look through. And it's also why I've really pushed my students not to use the word debunk as well.
Right.
It's explain. You're explaining. You're looking for explanation. You're trying to figure what's actually going on. And you're not debunking, because that implies some real negative stuff to begin with. We've done that a couple times, but
we've done it. And I usually said, and I think I mentioned it in the beginning of the course where I addressed it, and I see debunking as a result, not the purpose. I'm not going in to debunk something. I'm not, and we actually, the part of our conversation, I want to take a step back here, is that I always saw debunking as defined as taking the falseness out of the
Right.
hollowness. You know,
Right.
like there's a claim that's false and it's based on false ideas. You look at those ideas, you show that they're not true, and then thus you debunk it. But you added another layer by saying sometimes it's presents the idea of fraud,
Yeah.
or deliberate. And I was like, I don't remember reading that. And I actually dug into it more. I'm like, shit, it is part of definitions. Okay, so yeah, it is. So I can see if someone has that idea, that perception of what that word means. Yes, they might see if someone calls me a debunker, you know, and someone else is listening, they're like, oh, he's just going to call me a fraud. That's what he
Right.
does.
Right.
Which is not what I do, unless, of course, you are a fraud. But then I'm going to have the data to back it up. I'm going to have the evidence to back it up. So, but I think that was one of the great things that came out of the course, because I learned that from you. I didn't
And honestly,
realize.
I've been called a debunker a few times too.
Yeah.
By a couple of the phony psychics that I exposed. So,
and that's something that surprised me about you, because I have a few of your books on my shelf, and the use of psychics, and I was always like, in the beginning when I was my virgin skeptic, you know, I was angry and I was like, no, nothing, psychics just suck. And reading, when I read some of your books and you do work with psychics, I was like, what the hell? Why is he? And I in the beginning, I admit, like, I didn't take you seriously, but look at that look, like, okay, here it comes. But no, I mean, the more I got to know you, the more I understood, like, you don't just accept people. You actually worked to expose false psychics. You worked to show that they weren't doing what they said they were doing.
right.
So I like that. All right. So I'm talking a lot. Was there any other part of that?
There was another piece to that other question, which was, am I lecturing on the East Coast? And, you know, at this point, I'm not even sure when I'm coming to the East Coast next.
Right.
I understand that.
Yeah, COVID. But if I make it to the East Coast, it'll probably be at the end of June, beginning of July, for the annual Psychic Entertainers meeting. So,
is that something that's open?
We have a public show for sure. If we actually make it that far, I'm hoping, because a lot of our members are concerned right now about the COVID thing.
Right.
So if we make it, it'll be in White Plains the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And I think our public show will probably be on the 8th.
Okay.
At a hotel in White Plains. So yeah, I'll make sure that people know about it at that point. The conference itself is not open to anyone except for members, because we're a pretty closed group in that way. But I'll try to set up something separate as a lecture.
Okay. Cool. All right, Lark. What's up, Lark? Question was the course you did together for college credit? No.
The Ryan Education Center, think of it as an adult school, like continuing ed kind of thing. That's really what it is. I do teach one graduate course in parapsychology for Atlantic University, which we just started this week. But that's currently the only for credit course that I'm involved in. Okay.
John Kennedy, haven't NDEs been mostly explained as natural properties in the brain?
Some. Some have.
There we go. Next question.
What's interesting is how many different natural explanations of NDEs there have been, each one of them fitting some reported NDEs, but not covering the best of the ones we consider the real good ones.
Right. Do you find, so just off the top of my head, do you find that there might be similarities between experiences because people have read up on it and it's what is expected?
I think that there's something to be said for that. There is an expectation theory. That certainly wasn't the case in the 70s when the research really started on this. And there was a significant amount of research done in the 70s into the early 80s before even doctors got involved. I think Michael Sabom, who was a cardiologist, was one of the first doctors who really opened up that aspect of things. But suggestion definitely can play a role in the recollection or even talking about things. What's interesting is there's certain elements that are often left out of the near-death experience discussion, one of which is that in parts of the world, it is not a tunnel. apparently there's a bridge and a garden. So
Wow.
yeah,
I
in
did not
Asia,
know that.
in China, and I was in Japan for a television show actually years ago. They want to do something on near death, and they were surprised that Americans go through a tunnel.
Hmm.
In Japan, apparently, at least the Shinto folks and Buddhists were going over a bridge. So, maybe Japan there's a bridge, and in the U.S. there's a tunnel. I don't know.
I like the bridge idea better.
I do too.
So
Nice sunny day. It wasn't dark. That kind of thing.
Okay. That was my question. Like, I didn't know if
Yeah.
you know the full details, but like, are we talking like a plain bridge that's a beautiful sky and you're going over a river?
Yeah, it's going over a river or stream. I heard slightly different variations of that from several of the people I talked to. It's a garden usually, and again, because the people I was talking to, and this is one of the things we do know about NDEs, that who you meet, if you meet someone on that other end of the tunnel or the bridge, does get affected by cultural and religious beliefs and personal beliefs. So the interpretation of that is definitely a personal one. In the people I talked to who were Shinto, that involved ancestor worship to some extent. They met an ancestor when they went over that bridge. I've talked to people who have met relatives, or in some instances, if they are very religious Christians, they meet saints. Catholics might meet a saint. There's the glowing light, or just the voice, kind of the presence kind of thing.
Right.
Jewish grandmothers. So, just really, that's an element that still seems to be open to interpretation. And that what's interesting there is there have been studies looking cross-culturally, and there is that element. So the one study looked at Hindus versus Christians and found Christians more likely to meet someone who was of that, iconography, whereas the Hindus met a Hindu god.
Okay. So Christians would probably meet more somebody like in robes, more like
Or
Jesus.
Maybe Jesus, maybe
Yeah.
somebody like that. Sure.
Okay.
That's kind of cool
really...
how it kind of goes with how people believe, though. Like maybe
Yeah.
that is significant in some kind of way.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, it is significant. It really is.
Well, and it raises a question, because there's a small percentage that are considered negative near-death experiences, where people see the devil and demons and fire and the whole thing.
Annie.
And
no, I'm only kidding.
There are people who are told throughout their life that they're going to hell. So
Kenny's been told that many times.
Yep. I've been told I'm going to hell. I've been told I was.
I've been told that too.
Yeah.
I don't believe in hell, so I'm not worried about it.
That's my philosophy. I don't believe in it, so I'm good. Yeah. I'm good. All right. So we have a few more. We have a few more. Okay. John Michael. Hey, John without an H. How do you
study?
That is inherently subjective and in an objective way. Wow.
Well, that's a good question. That's why when we do experiments in the laboratory, we do experiments that as best as we possibly can. And actually, some of the experiments are set up so that there literally is no possible way that there's sensory leakage or guesswork involved. And so information transfer is objective. Let's think about the word subjective versus objective, because there's very little about the human being that we can study objectively when it comes to behavior or perception or emotion. For example, emotion is completely subjective. Psychology is based on subjective study of behavior. You can do experiments, but they're still based on subjectivity.
Right. And
the willingness of the participants to be truthful in what they do.
Yeah.
So, social science, parapsychology is a social science. We do some stuff that is bordering in the physical sciences. We try to bring in that as well. But parapsychology is inherently a social science. And yes, we are studying subjective behavior. But that's about information. If you try to, if you give somebody a test based on learning from a course, that's subjective. We can objectively assess it based on what we know. But maybe the ones who are grading are wrong.
Right. And, that example was really good when you're grading a test, because if you're grading a test that has like multiple choice answers, then it's more objective. But if
Right.
you're grading a test that has essays on it, now it's subjective because it's dependent on the instructor, whether they like what you wrote, if they thought you had enough information or not. Then it's definitely subjective. It's subjective. Wow. I'm feeling
And haven't we all written papers in college that were totally
yeah.
we are, you know, that we disagreed with the person who was grading that paper because their subjective perspective was different from
Right.
ours.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's going to happen. It's definitely
Yeah.
going to happen. And I mean, when I write any article and I send it in, honestly, and it's probably just my own anxiety, I think every article I write sucks. I really do. I go through so many revisions and I send it in and I'm like, this sucks. It's gonna be sent back. And then, most of the time I don't hear anything, but sometimes I do hear like, oh, good job, good job. And I'm like, really? I thought it sucked. But it's a subjective perspective, like I see it one way, people see it the other way. So it's all good. It's all
Yeah.
good. All right. Good. We have any more?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh.
Just put another one.
Oh, good. So do you think that people's beliefs determine what happens in the next life?
Honestly, I don't know because I haven't been there.
That's a great answer. I love that answer. I use that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, if folks have seen the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams and Cuba Gooding Jr., he goes to an afterlife, and everybody's individual afterlife is based on what they expect or what their psychology is. That's actually based on a really great book called What Dreams May Come by Richard Matheson, who was a horror and science fiction and fiction writer who knew probably more about parapsychology than some of my colleagues, because he went out and did that. He had a phenomenal library for that matter. And so the book fairly rings true, which is interesting. I mean, even that movie to some extent rings true. All that we hear about the afterlife is all based on either religious dogma,
Right.
mythology, if it's from mediums who supposedly are talking to people on the other side. My feeling, and this comes from my background in reading so much science fiction. There was a book called Traitor to the Living by Philip Jose Farmer, one of my favorite authors, which describes the afterlife in a way that fairly simply is a kind of electromagnetic body universe. And part of this is it's more different than we can conceive of. So if the afterlife is something we can't conceive of, how do we describe it or think about it, except in human terms?
Right.
At this point.
Exactly. And I agree. I mean, everything we quote unquote know about the afterlife comes from subjective sources. It's not something we don't have any concrete data to back it up. And you have religions, you have personal beliefs, you have no religion, you go to extremes where, as soon as you close your eyes the last time, that's it, to, hey, everyone gets a mansion in the sky, stuff like that. So it's the afterlife. I mean, I don't believe in an afterlife simply because I don't know. I haven't been there yet, so I'm waiting.
Yes, and the evidence to me says that there is something. I just don't know what it is.
I'm willing to wait another 100 years.
Oh, I'm going 3,000 years. I don't want to wait for another 100 years.
My ultimate goal is about 120. I want to reach 120.
I always get asked about this. It's like, what do you think about the afterlife? I said, well, I don't know, and I won't know until I get there. And I'm in no hurry to find out for sure.
Right.
Yeah. One of my colleagues years ago put out the idea. Just made the statement. This is a paraphrase. This is Gertrude Schmeidler. She says the idea of an afterlife, what the afterlife is like, is one of the only things that we'll only know if an afterlife exists. If we disbelieve in it, so we'll only know if we're wrong. So if you don't believe it, for example, you don't believe in an afterlife, if there is one, you'll be wrong, and if there is none, we won't know anything. So,
right. And this has come up on the show quite a few times, because I mean the nature of the show, it comes up. You usually get a question: do you believe in the afterlife? I don't, and it's not saying I reject it. I'm just saying I don't know. I'm waiting till I get there. You know,
And for us, a lot, it's really, do you believe in survival of consciousness versus do you believe in an afterlife? Right. It's like, those are two different things.
Yeah. What afterlife? I mean, that's not, by definition, it just means like after this life. You can still hang out in a different form if that's possible, which would kind of suck. I mean, for me, it would kind of suck because it's like, all right, well, I've already been here. I want to go somewhere else, you know, or hang out. Or, I mean, since we're invisible, because most of the time we'll be invisible, then I would just screw with people all the time.
Right. Well, see, and I plan on traveling to other planets and just, you know,
Yeah.
I figure, you know, I'm a Star Trek fan. I'm going out there.
There you go. I want to see what happens. Like, can we actually stay here? Or is it that idea that because the planet's spinning and rotating and orbiting the sun, like, do we just slide off and now we're in space and we're kind of just floating, and, you know, the spirits of the millions of people that died before us are just free floating in space. That's an
interesting story idea.
Yeah. Yeah, just millions and millions.
That would be that's a pretty cool science fiction idea. Yeah.
Lark's got a follow-up here. Wouldn't you get the feeling for whether beliefs align with afterlife from mediums?
So that's a good question. You know, I work with mostly mediums I have confirmed for my own, you know, criteria, but also with folks who have gone through a testing process for the Forever Family Foundation, which is an organization that does support the work of spirit mediums and the family grieving process, but also supports research in survival. And they all have the same general idea that it's pretty pleasant, but talking to them, they tell me, and they have been consistent across, and other people as well I've talked to, is that whoever they're talking to on that so-called other side can only work through the concepts and then that's in that medium's brain. So again, if it's more different than anyone can conceive of who's alive, how do you talk about it or communicate that to someone who is still alive and dealing with the physical reality that we're dealing with?
That's basically saying it's asking someone to describe the indescribable.
Yes,
that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
we don't have words for it.
Yeah.
And yeah. So that's a problem, and I think that essentially they've settled on an agreed upon. Right. Okay, you guys can't understand what's going on here, so we'll give you this image instead.
Yeah. All right, so I know there's more questions, and all right, we'll get to this one, and I have a question for myself, and then we'll probably be in time for a break. So everyone's waiting for the pee break. It's coming up in about 15 minutes. So Bob's question is: Have you ever been challenged in any of your classes by a student who just is so ingrained in their beliefs, and how do you handle it?
The only times that has happened, and it's happened. Actually, I don't think it's happened with the Rhine Center folks. It's happened with another place that I was teaching for a while, and even certainly happened even at JFK University way back when. Folks who are stuck on some real new agey, mythological, magical concepts just sometimes are stuck with that. It's the best I can do is try to explain to them why we're coming to this particular perspective, how we got to where we are in parapsychology. But I've had a few students here and there who just said, well, that's absolutely not right. Or, you know, those people you're dealing with are wrong. And they're just adamant about what they believe. And sometimes that can be pretty interesting from, you know, I met some woman who, and she was not of Celtic descent, but she truly believed in the wee folk and in fairies and such like that. Okay. Truly believed in that. And, you know, good for her. That's all I can say. Good for you. She was not in my class, thankfully. That would have been a little harder.
I haven't found any yet. When I find one and get a picture, I'll let you know.
Okay,
Divine Dawn over here loves fairies. Loves fairies.
I don't know why. I'm just missing.
I have pictures. Somebody sent them to me. They were from a place called Connolly.
That's the Arthur Conan Doyle.
Yeah. I'm just messing with you.
Yeah. You know, I have done events or lectures and even done psychic entertainment, and had I can think of one example where I was doing a show. It was doing a psychic entertainment show followed by a medium I worked with for many years, Annette Martin, and she did her thing. And these two women came up to us afterwards and ignored me. I'm standing right next to Annette, just like looked directly at her and said, "How can you work with that man? He makes fun of what you're doing." And Annette just looked at them and started laughing and said, "If I can't have fun with this, I'm not doing it."
Right. I mean, it goes back to the beginning of the show when I mentioned like working together, and you can work together with people that have completely different beliefs than you.
Yes.
It's not like it's taboo or you just can't do it. You can. I've have plenty of friends that claim to be psychic or claim to be mediums or both, and all kinds of other superpowers, if you will. But I don't shun them just because they make those claims. I mean, we talk about it and we have conversations about it and we can work together. So there's no reason not to.
Yeah, I was very good friends with a skeptic named Bob Steiner, who many years ago, who was the founder of the Bay Area Skeptics and a magician. He was actually president of the Society of American Magicians for a while. And Bob and I had long discussions. We had a lot in common otherwise. And people would ask, "How come you guys are friends?" And Bob and I would look at each other and Bob would say, "Because we both agree that the other is wrong."
There you go. That's good. That's okay because you can still work together.
Right.
That's so cool. All right. So we got that question. I have a question that I want to get to. I do. So, and because I'm the host of the show, I can butt in front of everyone. So my question, and this might lead to a discussion later, but I think it'll be a good 15-minute discussion. What does it take to earn the title of parapsychologist? And in addition to that, can anyone just say that they're a parapsychologist?
Okay, well, first, the second part, I should tell you that there is a law in every state that the American Psychological Association somehow got on the books years ago. And we actually had someone from the Board of Behavioral Services talk to us at our Parapsychological Association convention a few years ago. And the law states, the law is actually easy to challenge for a number of reasons, but it basically states that you can't use the word psychology or psychologist in your title unless you have, has a list of qualifications for that.
Okay.
It also states you can't do counseling. You can't do the things it states would actually fit in terms of what a psychologist does. Loosely fit journalists and attorneys and a number of other categories of professions. When I directly asked that woman from the Board of Behavioral Service, she was telling everybody, be really careful using that term, even though fortunately, everybody in the room, I think that probably at least 2/3 of the people had a PhD in psychology, so they could get away with it anyway.
Okay.
I think one of the physicists who was calling himself a parapsychologist started calling himself a paraphysicist instead. And I walked up and I said, "Well, I don't have a degree in psychology, but I do have an accredited degree in parapsychology. Can I call myself a parapsychologist?" And she kind of hemmed and hawed and said, "Yes." And I said, "So have you thought about all," this is back in the 80s, "have you thought about all the people in the yellow pages who are listed as parapsychologists? Because they were all psychics. They were all, Reverend such and so on." And she said, "No." And I explained what was in the yellow pages and the advertising. And I said, if you decided to go after anybody who was actually in our field, it wouldn't take much to file complaints with you guys on every one of those people in the yellow pages. And they had like 3 people. They couldn't handle all the complaints. So she just said, "Okay, forget it. I don't even want to deal with you guys." So really what it takes, you should know something about the field. Okay. And most ghost hunters have no clue. The very fact that one of the 2 principals in ghost hunters at a conference I attended, I was on a panel with them, got up in front of 200 people and said that there was no literature in the field before the 1990s. What? Was an indication that if he ever used the word parapsychologist, I'd have to slap him down, because the field's been around since the 1880s. And
there was no computer back then.
There was no computer back then.
Right. That's the problem.
Damn millennials.
except that the Internet Archive was in existence when we were on this panel, and there are plenty of books from before 1924 that he could have actually accessed. And my first book which one of those team members actually mentioned frequently, was printed in 1986. So at least I was before the 1990s. But you need to know something about the history of the field. You need to know something about the science of the field. Even folks who specialize in field investigation and field research need to know what the actual research in the laboratories has found, how we compare that to what's been done in field investigation and field research, and vice versa, because the two feed into each other.
Okay.
So one should also have a background in some field of science, either social or physical science, and a real background, not a pretend PhD from a diploma mill, in fact, because there's too many of those as well. And most importantly, they should be connected to, or get connected to, colleagues in the Parapsychological Association, and or at least, the very least, the Society for Psychical Research, which anybody can join, but not anybody necessarily is involved in the society. So really, there should be an actual involvement in the field itself to call yourself a parapsychologist. Otherwise, you could always call yourself an amateur parapsychologist.
Nobody's going to do that.
No one's going to do that. Yeah.
Which is crazy, because amateur astronomers make most of the discoveries.
Yeah.
But in the paranormal field, anything, if you say amateur, they're all like,
You know what? I get it. And like, I never called myself a scientist. I deal with science. I promote science. I write about science. But if I've referred to myself as like something like that, I've always said citizen scientist.
Yes.
That's
I'm going to mention that. Yeah.
I'm defined as that.
Well, here's
I fit the
student of parapsychology too. That's better.
And that's good too. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. That's showing that, yes, you're not a parapsychologist. You're not a scientist, whatever. You like to read up on it. You follow it. You engage in activities and or discussions about it. Yes, that's cool. But I will never pretend to be a scientist, because I've come across people that do pretend to do that. That they have promoted themselves at like paranormal conventions, where they're like, oh yeah, we're scientists. Oh really? What's your degree in? Oh, we don't have one, but we do experiments. And then that's a whole can of worms I don't want to open, because it's just you have no idea what an experiment it is. But
yeah,
I mean, when we first connected, it was because I was doing an article on people doing or promoting themselves as a parapsychologist using a diploma from a diploma mill.
Yeah.
I hear it in your voice, like, oh my god. And it was a long discussion that I had with certain people, and they got it from a diploma mill, which, you take a course for 5 hours or so. And I did the same thing, and I did it for the article. In 5 hours, while I was drunk, like, I'm not talking buzzed, I was drunk off my ass in a hotel, and I took the tests. I didn't look at the course. I took the tests, and I still passed, and I got a diploma. And I was like, wow.
The old International Ghost Hunter Society, which is responsible for something else, they had two certification courses. One was as a certified ghost hunter, and one was as a certified parapsychologist. And a friend of mine actually had bought them, and she sent me the materials. And there is no parapsychology in the certified parapsychology course.
I felt this. Like, I've never taken a parapsychology course, like a legitimate course. I do have the standard, I want to call it the standard manual of parapsychology. I forget what it's called.
The handbook.
The handbook. Yes, I have the handbook. And my buddy Dave Schumacher, who's he was in the chat room, he recommended it. I bought it and I started reading it, but I never got to finish it. But
it's very academic.
Yes, and I like that kind of stuff, but it was just time and other projects.
Yeah.
But even the little bit that I did read, and a little bit more that I do read online, and then of course Dave. I mean, anytime I bring up a subject and we start discussing it, he sends me studies, so I get to read through them. Because I mean, Dave is like the study whore. He just has tons of them, which I love. I absolutely love. But taking the course that I did, it's exactly what you said. There was no parapsychology that I recognized in it. It was more or less this is what we do with ghosts. Like they were talking about ghost hunting. They were talking about the evil skeptics. And then a little bit in between, and they had some stories, like they featured the 21 grams experiment, which if anyone's interested, we're going to talk about that tomorrow night on 3 Tortured Souls. But stuff like that, but just the Cliff Notes version. It wasn't an in-depth education, and yet I have a diploma that's in a frame, because I put it in a frame, hanging in my basement wall now, saying, hey,
and maybe I should get a PhD in parapsychology.
I can copy mine and just put your name in. That's all.
There's a school in Florida, I think it is, the metaphysical school, that offers a PhD in parapsychology. And somebody had said that they were claiming to be licensed, and so I looked into their site, and they have a business license from the town. That's their license, their accreditation, and their dissertation. They use the word dissertation, was something like 9 to 15 pages for paper. Wow. So not terribly academically rigorous.
Yes, and that's something that, I mean, I bring that question up, and we're down to 3 minutes before a break, but I bring that question up. And I wanted to get your insight into it, because there are so many people out there in the paranormal community that use that title. It's on their banners when you go to conventions. It's on their business cards. And when you start looking into it, when you ask the simple question, where did you get your degree? They can't answer it. I mean, one person actually said, well, I do science experiments. And
I did it when I was 6.
I did it. I have a kit that's still in my attic. I was doing it. So I don't know. How do you get the power in front of that? Because you did experiments. I don't, and continuation was like, oh, I do it in haunted locations. That's great. And I read the alleged experiments, and it was more or less a blog post. Like, you're not a parapsychologist. But when you go out onto the floor of a convention and you talk to other people, and God forbid you've been on TV and you have the lower thirds title come up and say parapsychologist, that's how people know you. When you bring up a name and you start talking to other guests or attendees, and they're like, oh yeah, he's a parapsychologist. No, he's not. And I think that's a big deal, because it's presenting an authority that was not earned.
Right.
And that's the reason I reached out to you initially, because I'm like, all right, I know you have an actual degree. I know you are legit. So I wanted to talk to you, and how do you get this? How do you get this? How do you become this title? How do you actually legitimately become a parapsychologist? It was a great discussion. I mean, that was great, because it led to so much more. Hey, you're here.
Right. Right.
So with that, we're going to take our break. We're going to take our pee break. So everyone, because I know, like John Kennedy, I think, or Bob, somebody out there was really needing a pee break. So let me get this up here and a refill, because I'm empty. So let's see. Where's my video? There it is. So everyone, a new commercial. There's a little bit added to it. So you have 3 minutes, and I think like 3 minutes and 2 seconds or something like that. So I will see you back here in 3 minutes from now.
Okay.
Hey everyone, this is my store based on the theme of science and skepticism. It's here that you can find all kinds of shirts and hoodies, yoga pants, tote bags, the fanny packs I know you guys love, masks and pillows, all with science and skepticism as the theme. I even have hoodies for your pets. That's right, your dog or cat can wear one of these things. I also have a general store that sells more inspirational quotes or, drinking stuff, because I like that kind of thing. I also have a store set up for our 3 Tortured Souls podcast, which we do Saturday nights. You You can find shirts and Tim Vicker's favorite drinking vessel, the mug. I also have a store tailored a little bit more towards my ghost hunting friends, Paranormal by I Am Kenny Biddle. These are shirts and quotes that are a little bit more on the ghost hunting side, especially this one, Translucent Perished Beings. You know, ghosts. That's my favorite. So if you're interested, head on over to teespring.com/stores/scientific skepticism by IAKB and check it out. Thanks.
Are you tortured by what you see and hear about the paranormal field? Join us as we critically examine and question paranormal claims, science, ghosts, demons, cryptids, UFOs, ghost hunting technology, and much more are all on the table for discussion. 3 Tortured Souls is a video podcast that streams live on Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 Pacific.
3 Tortured Souls.
All right, we are back. Welcome back. I love that. Our previous commercial was 2 minutes and 22 seconds, and it was like we were just sitting down as it stopped. So the extra couple seconds there really helps out. So you good? You good? You want to do some more questions?
Sure.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. You've been an awesome guest. I love it. Very relaxed, nice, easygoing. The very definition of what the Skeptical Health Bar is.
That's good. That's good. Maybe the rum is helping a little bit too.
I'm sure. No pressure, just relaxing. John Kennedy, good friend of mine. Can we define survival then? Where does our consciousness live, if not the physical realm we can measure and test?
I would throw a question back at John. Can we define consciousness in a way that everybody agrees?
That will never happen because everyone will never ever agree.
Yeah, the problem. This is the big question for us. I mean, technically, parapsychology is not parapsychology because we really don't study behavior so much. We are dealing with epiphenomena of the mind, of consciousness itself, and at the heart of that, when we're talking about survival, it's hard to say where consciousness can be after death, when it survives, if we don't even know what consciousness is.
Right.
And there are so many different perspectives in neuroscience, even different perspectives in neuroscience, in physics, in certainly psychology has serious problems with consciousness in general. So we're at a point in science where there's a lot more attention going to that question from all fields of science, not certainly just neuroscience or psychology. And I think we're going to start seeing some more to that. But even with that, there are some very differing physical theories about consciousness, whether it's just the brain or more than that. We're not even talking parapsychology here. There are folks outside of the field of parapsychology that see consciousness as non-local, as not necessarily being just the brain. So the where, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. Okay.
Another question.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Good answer. Lark's been really good with the questions tonight.
Yeah, there's a few more that I skipped over.
Have you or could you put together a syllabus with books, articles, etc. for a self-study parapsychology course?
Kind of have. The course that I teach. First of all, I should say that the syllabus for the courses we teach at the Rhine Center, all of those syllabi are actually up, so you can see the actual outline. It doesn't give you all the details of everything else, but the way Atlantic University works, it's an online school, and we work as mentors rather than instructors per se. So I'm not like giving a weekly lecture.
Okay.
There's materials. It pretty much is self-study, although I've instituted 3 or 4 regular meetings for my students because I'm kind of tired of just seeing them in discussion posts. I want to actually meet them in person, even if it's only on Zoom. So I'm very happy to send out that. I don't know. I think that syllabus might be up on the Atlantic University website, but I'm happy to pull out all the AU administrative stuff and just simply give that to folks. If they wanted to, they should just send me an email to that.
I'm going to drop the link of the Ryan Research Center into the comments section. So
Ryan.org. And you might want to just post I'm perfectly happy to have my email go out there to folks listening. You might want to post profparanormal@gmail.com.
There you go. All right.
Cool. I'm happy to send that to folks. The articles, for the most part, the articles are available for free online.
I didn't. Okay. What's the email again?
PROF is in professor paranormal @gmail.com. So profparanormal@gmail.com.
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. Hey, Loyd. Oh, Tiffany, statement. Hey, Loyd, in my online courses for my master's, they had videos/reading to do on your own and a weekly 1-hour Zoom for discussions and questions. Oh, okay. Just making
that makes sense. And I the Ryan classes, we have a weekly lecture, but then there's a lot of material for students to read or watch on their own.
Right. Okay.
Of course, if it was in person, there would be a lecture, and then people would have to go and do the reading at home. So that's not a strange model, actually.
Yeah. All right. Any more?
I think we're good. Unless, I can go back further. There were
Okay.
a few, unless you have something.
I did see that dreaded word that we both hate so much go by at one point. The one that starts with an O.
We don't want that. That was.
We don't say that word on this show.
No, that was. They were trying to get me to put that one up. I read right through that.
We do. So that I hate that word. I don't make too much of a big deal about it. There's another word that we have a drinking game from, and I'm sure we're gonna hear it in the comments now. But we try not to use the word that starts with E that pretty much every ghost hunter loves to use.
Without actually knowing what it means.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So
or the derivation of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, because that's.
But I will say, because I used to get asked this quite a bit. I have never been slimed, at least not by a ghost.
Okay. Yeah. And there we go, Bob. Thank you, jackass. All right, Kevin Kerr. Hey, buddy, from across the pond. Do you ever go out on investigations with the average ghost hunters?
I have a few times over the years.
Was it not a good experience?
It was a difficult experience. I had to be more diplomatic, perhaps, than I would have liked to. But there was one group that I did years ago where there were many things that were a problem. One of which was this was supposedly a residential case. It was supposed to be confidential, and yet they showed up. This is before sundown. They showed up with a big sign on their cars, and they were each wearing logo jackets and such like that. And there were neighbors and kids outside, and they carried in a huge equipment case, which probably could have been about the size of a briefcase. So that was number one. Confidentiality was broken right off the bat. So that was an ethical breach. The second thing was they all had the roles. Somebody was the equipment specialist, and somebody was this. And there's a woman who introduced herself as the team sensitive and the team debunker. And that was difficult because the woman who lived in the house knew what the word debunking meant. And she pulled me aside and said, hey, do they not believe that I'm having these experiences? So she actually knew what that meant. And then it turned out the woman was sensitive because when I questioned her perceptions, she started crying. So she was emotionally sensitive. She was not psychically sensitive.
I like how you twisted that. That was good.
Yeah, it's I've not had a lot of luck, and part of it also. I went to a conference in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. And I went back and forth with the guy running the conference, who's a well-known personality in the world of the ghost hunting world. And they wanted to go, this was for Eastern State Penitentiary, and they wanted me to come along and run one of the investigation groups. And the first thing I said is, well, that's fine, but I'm not going to turn the lights out because we don't do investigations in the dark. It makes no sense. He said, well, these people are going to want to have an experience in the dark, so maybe you shouldn't go. And we had agreed on that. And then he cornered me with Jason and Grant from Ghost Hunters, who said to me, as he introduced me to them, that one of them said something like, I understand you're running a group tonight. And I said, yeah, I'm not. And I looked at the guy and I said, and he's getting very fidgety. And they said, why not? I said, well, first of all, when we're doing an investigation, I need to talk to a witness. I want to talk to somebody who's had an experience at Eastern State. And I actually knew that there were none at that time because a friend of mine had investigated the place before it even opened up. Plus the fact that the place hadn't been cleaned up. So I didn't really want to go in with bat guano and all sorts of other crap that was there. Yeah. And I finally said, and I don't do it, I said, you guys know, we've met before. You guys know I don't do investigation in the dark. So the guy running the thing got very embarrassed and ended up bad-mouthing me and firing me from the couple of events that he had booked me for going forward.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, I will go out with a local group, if in fact, after I've talked to them, they have a serious interest and some knowledge of what they're doing.
Right. And that should be how it is. I mean, I go out with groups, and it's not to lead a group, because I just don't do that. When I work, I usually work on my own, or when I get stuck and I need advice from someone else that has more knowledge in an area, then I reach out, of course. But going out with local ghost hunters or whatever ghost hunting groups, like conferences, they always have some kind of ghost hunt associated with it. And if I can get myself invited for very cheap or free, because they're often expensive, then I'll go just to observe. Like I literally sit in the corner with my notebook and just write down notes and like how people are behaving, what equipment that they think is great or what they're using, how they're using it. Are they using it correctly? Are they making assumptions? Yes. And just on, just collecting that observational data, just that I can put it in my file cabinet so that I can look back over the last year and just say, all right, well, I went to, maybe 20 ghost hunts, and this was the common behavior throughout. And it's interesting for me, and it's more personal. I don't do anything with it. I don't actually publish anything about it, at least not yet. But it's interesting to observe and see the behaviors, and that gives me fuel for other stuff, for other articles. Like I can write about something about photography and say, well, this is the common trend that I see now, and I've seen it because I've gone on 20 ghost hunts over the last year, and that's what everyone's been doing. So it's always interesting to do that. But otherwise, I don't really go on ghost hunts unless I have a purpose like that, because like the reasons you cited, it's just, you have a lot of questions, a lot of people that, especially people that wear the photographer's vests that aren't doing photography, and it's all stuffed with ghost hunting equipment. And they're like, I am the ghost hunter. And I'm not making fun of all ghost hunters. If you're watching, just the few that wear the photographer's vest.
Kenny has one.
I do, but I am a photographer.
No, but he had it before then, guys. He really did.
Oh, shut up! Your mic is turned off. No more Donna. But yeah, she's right. I did have it. I was one of those people, and I've said it before. No, it's no secret. I was a ghost hunter, and I made all those mistakes. So I know. I come from experience. I know how it feels. So all right. Do we have any more questions?
There's plenty of questions.
There's plenty of questions. Yes. Okay. This is great. I love this kind of stuff when the chat room gets really involved. Aaron, can you give us some tips, advice to help us improve our investigations research, like not turning off the lights?
Number one, don't focus on your equipment unless you're using it to assess the environment, because that's the only reason to use any of that equipment, is what's going on in the environment that might connect to people's experiences. But even before that, interview witnesses, people who've had experience. If you don't have a ghost story, what in the world are you doing?
Right.
I mean, what are you investigating? Just because it's a spooky building that has folklore around it, that's not a good enough reason to go in. I get asked about some of these places that have been on TV all over the country, and people are surprised that I've not been to Waverly Hills I have no interest in that unless I can talk to firsthand witnesses at this point who have already been contaminated by all the TV shows. So that makes it very, very difficult. So interviewing is the thing that I really emphasize with my students, asking questions and then reviewing the environment yourself without equipment to see what could lead people to conclude that they had a psychic or paranormal experience, and then going through every one of their reported experiences to determine which ones have what kind of explanation, because there's rarely an overall explanation for everything people report in those circumstances. The reason not to turn out the lights, there's several reasons. Number one, would you go butterfly hunting at night?
No.
Okay, so people see butterflies during the daytime, right?
Right.
Sleep at
People
night.
rarely have ghost experiences with the lights out in the middle of the night.
Right.
It's okay. I know that people talk about it being quieter, and that is true. That's fine, but there's no reason to have the lights out. I mean, because there is so much data in psychology, especially the psychology of perception, and then from the entertainer side, from the psychic entertainer side, and magician side, we know so much, and also from the history of spiritualism, that people are terrible observers in the dark, flat out.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible observers. So why are you doing this? And the reason you're doing it is because you saw it on TV. That's the only reason that you're doing it.
Right. The stuff in the dark, I always bring this up, is that there when you turn the lights out, there is a chemical process that goes on in your eyes.
Yes.
And you do not have this dark vision, this nighttime vision, like instantly. It's not like, oh, after a few seconds, I can see in the dark perfectly. No. Initially, and it's been a while, but I believe initially it takes at least 20 minutes for you to start getting your dark adaptation.
Yeah, that's about right.
Sight. And then it takes almost a full hour before you're fully invested into dark adaptation, walking around.
And that's assuming there is some light source.
Yes.
Even a minimal light source.
Right.
Without any light source, if it's literally pitch black, you're not going to adapt to anything because there's nothing to adapt to. But your eyes will start seeing little flashes of things.
Mm-hmm. And it resets when you turn on the light on. If you're sitting here in the dark and all of a sudden you're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to check Facebook or I'm going to post a picture. Guess what?
It gives me an instant migraine.
Well, yeah, some people gives it instant migraine, but you turn that on and you get the light from your phone. Now you're screwing it up. The chemical process is reversing and you have to start almost over again. So it bothers me when people are like, oh, well, I was seeing this in the dark and it was great. I was like, well, how long did you turn the lights off for? Oh, like 2 minutes. And I was seeing the shadows and stuff. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, there's other things that are causing that. It's not necessarily a ghost. It's just, do you understand how this works?
Well, and in that circumstance, we're going to see shadowy things because our eyes have not adapted.
Right.
And even if it was something that your eyes weren't picking up normally, why are you assuming that's a ghost?
Exactly. Man, this is why we get along so well. I love that because it's not, why do you assume first,
right,
you're seeing a ghost?
So over the years, I haven't attended a lot of paranormal conferences. I haven't been invited to one in a long time, and I'm really happy about that, actually. They're actually not that common here on the West Coast. So they're a lot more common like east of the Mississippi.
Right.
And there are a couple times that I did do one in North Carolina on a battleship, and because I knew the guy, I said, okay, I'll hang out in the dark with these folks coming in and do their EVP. But if they get too serious, just know that I'm going to screw with them. I didn't have to do that, but all it literally takes in a darkened room is a penny thrown across the room.
Right.
And suddenly they'll hear something behind them or otherwise. And you can do a lot with a water pistol with very, very cold water.
Oh, this is going to be great.
So I remember one time we were at Bolton Mansion in Levittown,
Oh
Pennsylvania, and
I did not like that place at all.
there was a group that came in. We were there for observation. Like I had talked to the people running it, and I said, I'd like to just come and watch, and see what's going on. They were totally fine with it. So this group comes in, and they have their Pelican cases, dozens and dozens of things. And 5 minutes into a conversation, I had the understanding that they had no idea how to use any of the equipment that they brought in. But they set it up. And they set up in the basement. They have K2 meters. They had REM pods. They had a whole bunch of stuff. And I walked into the living room, which was right above the basement main room that they were in, with my walkie-talkie. And I went click, click. And you hear, oh, there it is. There it is. We're talking to them. Click, click. And they're talking to me. And they don't realize it. And I waited. I waited for them at the top of the stairs, thinking maybe they'll come up and they'll tell me the story, or maybe they'll start looking for other reasons why. And they never did. I mean, at the end of the night, I told them it was me. I didn't let them go home thinking, they were talking to a ghost. I told them it was me, and I showed them how it was done. And it was a good lesson for them, at least I hope it was, to check.
Kenny Biddle's an asshole.
Basically, yeah.
Well, and I've been called that too by some folks.
Yeah. I mean, that was the general consensus. But, it was like, hey, this is a hard lesson. You guys thought you were talking to a ghost. You didn't bother to control the environment whatsoever. You didn't ask if anyone was using any other equipment around. You didn't ask anything. You just assumed because it lit up, you were talking to a ghost. And I've done that in rooms where I was part of the group. I was sitting with them with the walkie-talkie in my hand on my lap, just keying it up. And they still thought something was going on.
We have lots of questions.
All right. All right. So I'm going to shut up now because so many. We try to get to as many questions as we can because it's a Q&A show. So, all right. So pop them up.
There we go.
Rich. Have you written any award-winning?
Hang on a second. So yes, as it happens, I have co-authored an award-winning book called Near Death, co-authored by Rich Jose.
I think
Rudnick and Loyd Auerbach.
Wow.
So this was our first novel that came out. We are actually in the process of revising the manuscript for the next novel, which is in the series of their paranormal mysteries. It's called Afterlife.
Wow.
And our two protagonists, one's a parapsychologist, anthropologist, the other's a cop, now retired cop, who had a near-death experience and doesn't believe it. So,
wow. Okay. Good one, Rich. Self-promotion. Nice one. Bob has a question. If you were to lead a ghost hunt, who, meaning what professionals, would you bring along?
Well, first, it would depend on the kind of case that we're dealing with, based on the initial interview and so on. I don't do actual ghost hunts. We do investigations of reports that people have, experiences people have for the most part. Certainly, if it's a situation involving people who have any sort of trauma at all, having someone who has some background in counseling, we're certainly always ready with referrals to counselors, to psychotherapists, because even if it's a false experience, people can be traumatized by something they've concluded is horrible or terrible, and yeah, so that's a piece of it that we look at. I have folks. I do work with some professional psychics and mediums over the years, but they're also very good at picking up non-paranormal stuff, which is one of my criteria for working with such people. I have worked with people with a physics background. I have worked with people with an electronics background, depending on what we're actually dealing with. I've worked with people who have a background in civil engineering and other kinds of engineering. I had one guy who was really who had worked as a building inspector.
Oh,
So,
nice. I love that. Yeah.
yeah. So that was a really good opportunity for us to find. It happened to be a case where there wasn't anything paranormal, but there were so many things going on that I couldn't fathom how they couldn't have concluded it was paranormal. There's a whole bunch of unusual environmental and physical structural issues that naturally led them to think that there was something paranormal going on.
Okay.
So it just really depends on the kind of case that we're dealing with right up front for that. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's limited because I don't have necessarily somebody, I don't have like people ready to go. We don't have that firehouse. We're not all ready to go all the time.
Right.
I like that. I want to point out that the first part of your answer, we are so similar with that. It's not like right off the bat, well, I would bring this person and this person. It depends on what type of case it is, because that's really important. It's not every case calls for the same people that you would reach out to. And I like that. It's because that's exactly what my answer would be.
You know, when I started in this field, my image in my head was the old Mission Impossible with Mr. Phelps going through the book of different agents that they could pick. Even though they always pick the same people every week, it was like, okay, let's figure out who we're going to use.
That's awesome. All right. Next question. Dave. Oh, Dave Schumacher. What's up, buddy?
Hey, Dave.
Loyd, what do you think is the evidential quality of witness reports experiences?
Well, you know, we have to take, first of all, they're all subjective. And part of the process of doing any investigation is deep interviews with these folks. Just to see how their stories hang together, and then comparing that to the environment, to what's actually there. I talk to people all the time. You know, we're looking in parapsychology, we may get thousands of reports of psychic experience every year. And we look at the underlying patterns of those. Do they all kind of hang together? So we're not necessarily looking at the individual experience, was this psychic or not, because there's no way to go back and find out in most of these situations. But we look to see how they compare against what we have learned over the last 100 years, plus the laboratory findings for these things. So it's kind of what, you know, what's done in sociology and in anthropology. You take the statements at face value, but you dig into them to some extent. And of course, we look for alternative explanations and how they might have misconstrued what's actually going on. But we start with, I mean, if we don't have anecdotal evidence, we have nothing.
Right. And that's something I've always agreed with, that I don't necessarily hold anecdotal evidence as solid evidence. I hold it as a starting point. Like, let's go from there and see what we can find. Maybe we can find out something is exactly how they described it, or it might not be. Human memory. I mean, there's plenty of studies on memory and how bad it can be. We have a habit of filling in the gaps. Our biases, our filters, what have you, will fill in some details that maybe didn't happen or didn't occur. Do you find it troubling if like, because you mentioned that if you're taking anecdotes and you're taking in the face value, and you understand that, you acknowledge that, because there's no way to go back sometimes and check these. Do you find it troubling if you get reports that are maybe 20, 25 years old? I guess accepting the how valid they might be, or, I mean, I don't know how to ask my question.
Yeah. So my response to that is, that's nice.
Okay. All right.
I mean, I have
you understand what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. You know, we have people contacting us, although it's been pretty, you know, since the advent of the expansion, the blow up of ghost hunters all over the country, you know, who often advertise better than I do. We don't get as much, although I think the Rhine Center and other organizations are getting reports of all sorts all the time. And even with the ghost stuff, I had somebody call me and say, you know, I had this experience. When was it? You know, how current is it? was it a little over a year ago? We just found your name in a book. I said, okay, a year ago, has anything happened since then? No. I said, well, I can tell you how it would be classified within our field if that's what actually happened, but that's as far as I can go. They want an investigation. It's like, what am I investigating? There's not even DNA evidence here.
Right.
It's not like the ectoplasm has left a residue. So we have to kind of, again, just take them very thankfully. It's really nice to get those reports, but that's about all we can do with them.
Okay.
At that point.
Fair answer. That's good. Cause I mean, I feel the same way. People tell me stories and it's like, great. When does this happen? Can we go to the place? Can we verify some of these details that you're giving us? And then if the response is, well, this was like in 1950 something, I'm like, oh, thank you very much for the story, but I don't think there's going to be anything we can do. I mean, that's so long ago.
For me, a lot of times people just want to tell their stories or experience because I'm somebody who will listen.
Right.
As opposed to, I used to, here in the Bay Area, we used to have, we're certainly not doing it now in the pandemic. We used to have this thing called casual carpooling. When I was working in San Francisco, where you'd go down to the BART station and you'd wait online and get into somebody's car, and usually with somebody on the line as well. And that was because they could go across the Bay Bridge with no toll and really fast. It kind of avoids traffic, and then we would get a free ride into San Francisco. And I got to know several of the people online. We would always go into the city together, and they loved to ask me a question about the latest ghost case I had to see how the drivers would react. And without exception, I can't think of a single exception, with the hundreds of people over the years that we did this, everybody had a story.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would always ask, and this is also at other events and things, I would always ask them, did you ever tell anybody this? No, I didn't know who to tell it to. It's like, did you tell your spouse? No, they would think I was crazy. It's like, there's a stigma attached to these experiences.
There is.
Right. And it really shouldn't be.
Starting to shift. I think it's starting to shift a little bit now.
It is.
But for those people that lived like back in the 60s, 70s, 50s, they're like back then, you didn't talk about that because you were crazy then.
Even into the 90s and early 2000s, you still didn't. If you were a lawyer or someone else, you didn't talk about that at all.
No, because you
had that high stakes professional career. You didn't say anything about that.
Yeah, and yet I was called in by a law firm. Yeah, I was called in by a law firm in San Francisco to because there had been reports of things happening, and it was an old Federal Reserve building that the firm was in. Oh, that'd be cool. In San Francisco. And some of the attorneys were seeing things after hours, and as it turned out, the security guys and the maintenance guys all had experiences too, which was, to me, they're often better witnesses than some of the other folks. And when we did a whole thing, I did talk to all the witnesses. I didn't come to any definite conclusions, but we then had a lunch with some of the staff, and I showed some of the video of the interviews that I did and kind of around the building. And the marketing person for the firm really, really, really wanted to put that out there to the world. And one of the managing partners said no, because some of our people might sue for being in a hostile work environment.
Wow.
Oh yeah, it's interesting because like whenever I go somewhere, like attend an event or even at work, when I've gone to work and met other people that I work with, and casual conversation comes up and I might mention, or maybe they heard like, oh, I heard a rumor that you investigate like paranormal stuff or supernatural stuff. And as soon as you say yes, they're like, oh, and they have tons of stories. Right, they just the floodgates open, and it's like, someone to talk to. That's great. And then you spend the next 2 hours listening to a lot of stories, which are
I've learned how to cut them off. So you have to learn that, Kenny.
Yeah. I mean, I'm good. I'm good with that. And if I listen to the first story and try to gauge, like, all right, is this going somewhere, or are they just, am I their therapist right now? Which is cool. I don't mind talking to people. I have no problem talking to people. It's just when I have to go, I have to go.
Right.
Let's talk later.
Okay.
So
you ready?
I know there's a lot of questions, and if we don't get to your questions tonight, we're going to have Loyd back on.
All right. And this Sunday night, I'm doing every other Sunday, I do a live Facebook Live thing called Ask Professor Paranormal.
Oh,
And
There you go.
that's 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific for an hour. It's on the page of The Live Paranormal. So it's facebook.com/The Live Paranormal. So
There
you
you
can
go.
always ask your questions there, assuming I had some technical issues last time, and hopefully that won't happen again.
Okay, that's good, because I do have two topics I want to address myself. So we'll take maybe like one or two more questions, and
All right,
then
here's one.
I want to get into my discussion. Bob, do you think that parapsychology could be a valid field in the future? In other words, do you see a path forward for legitimate degrees in parapsychology based on your experience with your degree in parapsychology, and whether or not people take it seriously right now?
You know, I think what's going to happen with parapsychology, because of what's going on in looking at consciousness as a whole, and the fact that that's our main function, is looking at phenomena of consciousness, that we're going to merge with whatever emerges out of the sciences as a field studying consciousness studies, or what's called consciousness. I mean, there already are a few schools that offers courses in consciousness studies, even degrees. I think there's 4 in the United States that do that right now. So I think that's where our future really lies. Every so often at our conferences, it comes up that we should rename our field, and it's like nobody can come up with a good name for it anyway. So we're dealing with phenomena of consciousness, experiences of consciousness, and that's where we need to be in the future. But even that, I mean, is not being taken completely seriously, depending on who the person is that's involved. I'm very fortunate in that once people, when they find out I have a degree in parapsychology, once they talk to me for a couple of minutes, I usually don't get any sort of problem with that. Because they first of all, I think they see that I take the subject seriously, but I don't take myself seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that's really important to me. It's actually one of the criteria I have for psychics and mediums I work with. If they don't have a good sense of humor, I don't want to go near them.
Right.
I mean, I take myself really seriously.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So I think there will be a path. The problem is there's such an academic bias and prejudice against the field. And frankly, that's been promoted since the 70s by the pseudo-skeptics, the deniers, who, you mention anything about this and they'll say, oh, you're just woo-woo, or they'll start laughing and giggling like, it's a dirty little secret or something like that. And that's made it. I've talked to academics. So have a couple of my colleagues, Dean Radin, tells stories about this as well. I've talked to people. I worked at a national lab in the library for a while, years ago, and not too long ago, but about 15 years ago. And I talked to some of the physicists and other folks there, one of whom was a researcher in consciousness studies, consciousness and physics. So he was fine. But some of the others would say, oh, parapsychology is not real. They didn't make fun of it, but they weren't going to take it seriously. And I learned to ask them the question, if they were physicists, do you think psychology is science? And without fail, they'd say no. So there's an academic prejudice depending on the field against my field. Honestly, the really weird thing is that the people who are most prejudiced against parapsychology are psychologists. That's all the surveys and such. The people who are most open are quantum physicists, because they have to deal outside the box all the time.
Okay.
So it's really going to depend on how consciousness studies shapes up. Okay. And I think a lot of psychologists are going to be left in the dirt behind that.
This is actually good. It leads into the two topics that I want to talk about. Is that
so no more questions? So
no more questions right now. Sorry, guys. I'm going to lead into it. I'm taking over because it's my show and I can do that. I'm the bartender. It says so right up there. What's your view and opinion of skepticism, and what improvements would you offer?
Well, I think that skepticism is important. There's like dead center skepticism where you're never going to make a decision either way, no matter how much evidence is presented to you, which is actually okay. I think it's fine to just keep taking in until it hits a point where you feel the evidence leads you one direction or the other. My problem, and many of my colleagues, when they hear the word skeptic, or somebody identifies themselves as a skeptic, because of the prominence of the pseudo-skeptics, as my late colleague Marcello Truzzi would say, because of them, because they're the loudmouths, the deniers, that makes real skeptics shy, I think. It makes it hard for us to identify who people, who we can really work with. And bringing in people from outside our field who can look at our evidence, look at our research, look at the controls, look at everything from a different perspective, I think is the best thing we can do. People who can ask questions about things is the best. And we do it internally all the time. I mean, what I put out there is not necessarily accepted by one colleague or another. We look at each other's research. There's often a lot of self-policing, pointing out errors and things like that. And sometimes personal feelings get hurt by folks. So which is normal, I think, in any field anyway. But I think it's that skepticism, which is really about asking questions and continuing to ask questions, is essential to any field.
Cool.
That's just really important.
So you mentioned the term pseudo skeptics, and just for everyone that's watching, can you give like a general description of what you consider a pseudo skeptic versus a skeptical person?
Well, a skeptical person should be asking questions, is a doubter, is in the middle, is not necessarily supporting either side, may come to that conclusion that they can support one side or the other for particular things, but is open to asking questions and learning going further. The pseudo skeptics are people who proudly wear the letter S on their shirts. They are,
it's a Superman shirt, doesn't count.
Hey, I have a Superman mask. Yeah, fortunately, it doesn't look like the Superman logo, thankfully. But they put themselves out there like skeptic with a capital S, like it's a badge of honor.
Okay.
And it should really be about how you're approaching things, not a badge of honor. And a pseudo skeptic is someone who disbelieves, who is coming at things from the perspective of this stuff is impossible or improbable. The evidence is wrong. You people don't know what you're doing. We see this constantly in the writings of certain so-called skeptics or pseudo skeptics, where they'll even make a statement like, well, why would I bother even reading the research? It's not possible. And that happens with academics. It happens within fields themselves. I mean, psychology itself has multiple schools of thought, and not everybody agrees with each other. In physics, you have string theory and the people who don't believe in string theory. So you have that kind of discussion going on. And some people, again, have strong beliefs one way or the other. But for us, the pseudo skeptics are no different than true believers. They're true disbelievers.
Okay.
And we can't deal with either end.
You touched on something about not reading the material because you pretty much dismiss it. If a pseudo skeptic looks at it and goes, and I think you said something like, it doesn't exist, why would I even bother reading the material?
Right.
I can't stand that. I really can't stand that.
I know.
And I hope it shows in my articles and my videos. Like, I explore the shit out of every angle that I can. If someone has a book, I buy it. I automatically buy it so I can read it, or at least read the relevant chapter, depending on what it is. If there's a video, I buy it. So I have it in my collection. I can reference it. I watch it because I want to know the material. I'm not going I have this personal rule that I will never review something unless I've experienced it, which means watch the movie, read the book, gone to the location. I can't review something if I've never experienced it. So if you don't review the material, then you can't review it. You simply can't. It's impossible. You are making shit up, and I can't stand. I fucking hate when people make shit up.
Right. Right.
It's pretty much what I get into when, like when ghost hunters and UFO hunters, Bigfoot hunters, they go out and they're like, oh, we had a great night. We had all these experiences. So we saw a Bigfoot, we saw a UFO, or we experienced an alien, or we experienced a Bigfoot. And it's like, did you actually see it? And the answer is no. Well, you didn't. How can you conclude that you saw a Bigfoot when you didn't actually see a Bigfoot? How can you conclude that you saw a ghost when you actually didn't see a ghost? I can't stand when you don't read the material, view the material, and then comment on it, or give your critique or criticism. I don't like that. And it drives me crazy. And that's why I spend so long on the stuff that I do, because I want to make sure I actually read it. I actually did it. If somebody asked me what I think about something, and I've done it on this show a lot, where if I've never read it and just heard of it, that's what I tell you. You know, I've heard of that. I don't know. Let's look it up. And we look it up, you know, on the show.
Yeah, sometimes we're buying books right then and
Sometimes, yeah, I've bought a couple books during the show because I'm like, I don't know what this is. Let's boom, boom. It'll be here in 2 days. I'll read it and let you know. So, all right. So with that, we covered your view of skepticism, and so let's flip the coin here and say, what improvements would you offer for the field of parapsychology? What would you do to improve their approach?
Funding.
Funding.
I mean, honestly, the Bigelow contest that just happened, which was Robert Bigelow's prize for essays that support the idea of survival of bodily death, which was none of them were written from a truly scientific or academic perspective. They were supposed to, the guidelines was to write them for talking about the evidence and as if you could convince a jury kind of thing. Okay. So there's already an article from within our field critiquing some of the essays, but their critique is irrelevant because they're going from a particular perspective that is not what Bigelow asked for. But that's $1.5 million that was pumped into the field. So we're hoping that actually helps spur on some really good research. Of course, it was given to individuals rather than to organizations. And really there's two things that need to happen. One is more funding. And along with that funding should be available not just to parapsychologists, but to people outside the field who want to get involved in looking at people's experiences, psychic experiences. Because what we need is new blood. I mean, we need bringing not only younger people, but other folks from other fields to look at the evidence, look at the information, look at the research, make suggestions, help us out with other things. Right. That's what needs to happen. There's a two-volume set called Extrasensory Perception, Support, Skepticism, and Science, edited by my friend Ed May and his associate Sonali Marwaha. And Ed he was the program director of the Stargate program for almost 11 years. And Ed is amazingly good at convincing people who are skeptical or who would have nothing to do with us to actually look at the evidence, look at the research. So this set actually has contributions from parapsychologists, but also from people well outside the field who had never looked at a research report or paper or anything like that. And while they didn't necessarily agree with the conclusions, they were universally surprised at the quality of the controls in the research. Enough possibly to bring them in if there was funding.
Right.
That'd be good. Yeah. There is one Lark's question here. I want to address that. So Lark asked, Kenny, didn't you make a statement earlier about being non-believers of ghosts or afterlife? Doesn't that make you a pseudo-skeptic? Or maybe I misunderstood. So for me, no, it doesn't. That's my current idea. And belief is just something I threw out there. I shouldn't use that word. I don't like using the word belief. My idea right now is that I don't think there's an afterlife. But I'm open to the idea or possibility of new evidence coming in. Any new evidence that comes in, new data comes in, I'm willing to look at it. I will look at it and consider it and talk to other people.
Well, you can have a belief and an opinion, and your opinion can be different than your belief.
I always say, and I know the chat room probably heard this a million times from me, but I don't like beliefs because beliefs are so hard to change. I'd rather have ideas. My ideas are easier to change because, like, I have an idea of what this is, but I'm not sure. And then new information comes in. I'm like, oh, well, I can adjust my idea accordingly, to valid information as opposed to non-valid information, and then keep going. So it's not that you misunderstood, Lark. It's just that I didn't finish the statement. So no, I don't have the idea that there's an afterlife or that ghosts exist, but I keep looking, because it would be comforting to know that this isn't the end because, I don't want to just, Although the idea of like closing my eyes and sleeping forever, because I don't sleep now.
That's because you don't now. Yeah.
That would be that's that's intriguing to me.
Kenny's afterlife.
That would be my afterlife.
Right,
Like everyone
right.
leave me the fuck alone. I am sleeping.
So I just want to add, Kenny, that having no belief is not the same as having a disbelief.
Right. I mean, it's just not. I am not saying no, ghosts don't exist. 100%. I don't know that. I don't have data either way. So right now, though, I'm just not convinced, and that's just me.
Right.
That's me, and I'll keep looking. I mean, I during the I don't know if it was actually during the course we were doing, or maybe it was like afterwards, but I volunteered to come down to the Ryan Institute and let them test me. Like let's do some tests, experiments. I'll volunteer. I'll jump on this. You put helmets or electrodes or whatever you want on me, and we'll see what happens. I'm hoping to get superpowers.
I want to see that.
That only happens with a helmet if there's a feedback or short circuit. So.
I'm fine with that. Yeah. As long as the end result is I get superpowers.
Right.
So, but yeah, that's funding is good for parapsychology, to get you guys a better understanding. And I hope overall, if people watching this show, you get the better sense of it's not just a bunch of people that are quote unquote like ghost hunters trying to prove that ghosts exist. It's not. And I think everyone should get the sense that Loyd has probably almost just as much skepticism as I do, if not the same. It's just we have different views on certain things.
Right.
But you show a lot of skepticism, a lot of doubt, and you're not afraid to voice that opinion, which is good. All right, so we do have some time. We have a couple minutes. We have time for maybe one more question. I'm gonna let you pick. I'm gonna let you pick a question.
All right, so look, I have to go back now because we weren't taking questions. So people.
So if we did miss a question, and if Donna doesn't pick your question, don't get pissed off.
Yeah, don't get mad at me.
There was a lot of people tonight asking a lot of questions. I think we've had the most questions tonight than most any other show.
So I'm gonna do two because this should be an easy question, and then there's another one.
All right. Shelley, did Mr. Auerbach even know or even work with Peter James? Oh, that's a good one.
Okay, so I did one short case. I was actually brought down by ABC to look at that ghost writer case. The guys who actually had writing on Polaroid pictures.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and he was there. He was there for that.
I have some Polaroids.
Yeah, honestly, my buddy Kerry Gaynor investigated that for sightings back in the 90s and was incredibly skeptical. I brought in I actually recommended a magician, mentalist who I knew, who was incredibly creative, who actually was able to duplicate it pretty quickly. And what I saw, honestly, was contrary to what Peter was picking up. I mean, I know people who felt very good about some of his stuff, but I also know people who didn't feel very good about his stuff. And in that particular instance, nothing happened because I was looking too carefully at what the guy was doing with his Polaroid camera. Okay. So our segment never even aired. And in that case, so I couldn't even tell you anything about working with Peter James because it really wasn't working with him.
I knew Peter. We spoke quite frequently. And he would send me stuff, links once in a while to say, hey, check it out. We actually had a discussion, and this was more of a positive discussion because I had seen, I don't know how it came up, but it came up in social media where there was a picture of him in front of his booth. He had a booth set up, and he had a banner behind him that said parapsychologist, and it had his name on it. And I questioned him about it. And I mean, basic question. I wasn't like pointing fingers and yelling at him, but I was like, hey, I noticed you had this on this title there. Did you earn that title? Like, did you actually go to school and earn that degree? And his response was honest. He was like, no, I said that because, I'm in ghost hunting and I do investigations. And we had a long discussion. Like not just text, but over the phone. I called him and we had a long discussion about what it means to be a parapsychologist and what it means to be a ghost hunter, and they're not the same. They are not interchangeable. And after our conversation, he was like, okay, you're right. I didn't realize that. I understand now. I'm going to take it down. I'm not going to put that up anymore. And he got a new banner, and he was keeping me updated. Like every few days he would send me something like, hey, I just ordered a new banner. It doesn't have that on there anymore. And then days later, he's like, I got it in. Here it is. He sent me a picture of it. He's like, it's good. We're good. And it was almost like he was worried. Like maybe I caused more trouble. And I'm like, dude, I brought it to your attention. We talked about it. You're fixing it. That's good. That's all I was looking for. So really nice guy.
I mean, I did hear that, certainly. I just never really didn't have a chance to talk to him even at that session. So,
and that's about it. Like I've talked to him on the phone a few times. And then, sadly learned of his passing, but nice guy, real nice guy. And he fixed the problem. He fixed an issue. So I give him credit, when you bring stuff up like that and, people realize it and say, oh, you know what? I did make a mistake, and they own up to it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people who've used the term parapsychologist. Psychics especially used to use it a lot in the 70s and 80s. And a lot of times because they didn't know any better and they thought it sounded better than psychic. So,
you know what? LinkedIn. If you go on LinkedIn looking for psychic mediums, I can't tell you how many people have the same parapsychology diploma from the same diploma mill. Holy crap.
I will have to look at that. I'm going to look at that and put a post up.
When I was looking through doing research for that article, I started searching. I searched for the name, and it just kept coming up with LinkedIn profiles. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Wow, this is awesome. All right, second question.
This is it.
Last question for the night. Loyd, my understanding of psi research is that decades of lab experiments have mostly produced small effect sizes. Is it fair to say, even if psi phenomena is real, that it's not very powerful? People can maybe influence a random number generator, but they're not Professor Charles X. No one is Professor X.
That's correct. No one. That's correct. So yeah, I think that the effect size typically is fairly small for most of us. The reality is that even anyone who has a psychic experience might have 3 in their entire lifetime, where it comes to the information bubbles up from their unconscious and comes to their attention and is not something sensory. It's not a power per se. It is something that's inherent in human beings. We can put more attention to things, but the effect size in research can be fairly small. Although it's better in certain experiments, such as the Gonsfeld experiments and certainly the remote viewing experiments, you can get there has been useful information in the remote viewing experiments, actionable information that has been done in those circumstances. But here's the thing. For the Stargate program, for example, they went through an enormous number of people in the Army to find the 6 people who could do this really well, like 3,600 people they went through. So think about artistic or musical talent. And musical talent may not even be a good one, but a good artist, somebody we consider a really good artist, is hard to find. A really great musician is really hard to find, but everybody might have a little bit of talent in that area. So yes, the effect size is small. There aren't any Professor X's or Marvel, or Phoenix or anybody else from Marvel.
Oh man!
I'm hoping. I got my booster shot today. I'm hoping. Still got.
Was it a radioactive booster shot?
Well, I asked for the one. I asked for the radioactive chip to be implanted. So I showed up. This is a funny story. I showed up at the place and I have my vaccine card in a 3D printed multi-pass from the Fifth Element. And I literally went up to the guy and he's like, "Can I help you?" I was like, "Multi-pass." I thought it was funny. I thought it was hilarious. I started laughing. He did not. I don't think he got the reference, but I was like, I'm here for my booster shot. Just give me the booster shot. Here's the card. So yeah. All right. I know you said last question, Kenny. It's not your fault, John. It's Divine Donna's. But can we
It's
have
not my-
all the
whoa,
details?
Whoa, back that shit up.
I said 2 more questions. Well, I said 1 question. You put 2 up, and then
Right.
you put a 3rd up.
We got a second. Just go.
profparanormal@gmail.com. Or follow me on Twitter @profparanormal or @Loyd Auerbach.
There you go.
I think yeah, Melissa
And
asked
then-
earlier too about the Sunday. You have your show on Sunday night, is it?
Yeah. So if you it's Sunday night, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern on it's facebook.com/thelive-paranormal. It's a Facebook Q&A. So basically you put in the comments, your questions, and I'll be talking at the screen for an hour.
Okay, so Facebook.com.
That's every other Sunday. So if you miss this Sunday, 2 weeks later, I'll be doing it again.
Okay, awesome. All right, no more questions. Damn it. Darn it.
These are your friends.
I know. I don't want to keep them too long. That was great. We're definitely going to have you back because this was a good night, and I love when people have so many questions, and it's nice to get them involved and interactive. So with that, you already gave your contact information. That's good. You did that for me. Thanks, Bob. So I'm going to, you can hang out. I'm going to do my announcements. I think they actually pop up on this side now. So, but yeah, definitely hang out for a second here. We're going to close out the show.
I'm actually going to be right back. While you're doing that, I'm going to be right back.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. So let's see. Oh, well, then I'm going to put this up full screen. There. How many more questions can I ask? None. None, Bob. Boot him. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I would never boot Bob. So some of the things that I got coming up, I don't know about the Rochester Parafest because the Squid Game Bob's announcements.
Yes.
I have to practice that.
You do.
The in March 25th to 27th, I'm not sure because unfortunately the COVID numbers are going up again.
Yeah.
We're having a spike, so I don't think I'm going to be traveling anytime soon. Just in case. I did get my 3rd shot. I got my booster shot today, but it's still I'm not going to chance it because too many people are getting it. Luckily, well, I don't know if it's luck. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's more sickness than deaths, which is kind of going in the right direction, but I still don't want to get it.
Some of them.
But potentially July 23rd is the Para Unity Expo. That's in Woodbridge, New Jersey. Both myself and Donna with Lucky Tiki Creations are going to have a booth set up. We're going to be there, and that's probably the cheapest paranormal conference you'll get into because I think it's only like $20 to get in.
Unity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's on par. It's actually not. It's one of two because the other one, August 19th to 21st, is the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash, which again, both of us will be there instead of. Well, actually, there's a change. So Lucky Tiki Creations will be there, and then instead of the Skeptical Help booth, it's going to be 3 Tortured Souls.
You heard it here tonight, guys.
Yes,
you heard it
that's
first.
right.
Kenny spilled the beans.
I spilled the beans. So as far as I know, because we've been talking about it, Dave Schumacher and Tim Vickers are going to come out. We're going to have a 3 Tortured Souls booth, and we're going to broadcast from there and just talk shit about everyone. No, I'm kidding. No, we will. Depending on how much we drink, because that's a conference we drink a lot at. What else is there? October 20th to 23rd is still scheduled in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's SciCon. It's the science conference put on by Skeptical Inquirer, which, as far as I know, is still on. And we're hoping to go out there. I'm not sure yet. And if we do, we might actually see JD out there because I think JD was planning on going out too.
That's cool.
But that's about it. I have a few other things in the works, but everything is kind of like potential tentative, depending on how the numbers go and all that stuff. Because, we want to stay safe and we don't want to potentially infect other people if we get sick. So, all right, I'm going to stop talking. Anyway, so after that, if you also like, I took out the Patreon link. I screwed that up. Wow. But if you want to see all the links everywhere you can follow us, you go down here to the link tree. If you type that in and go there. All my links are there. And if you want to do the Patreon, you can. Just no pressure, but you know, it just helps. The money from that helps to fund experiments, and you get behind the scenes videos of the experiments that I'm doing, and you can see when I screw up, which I think are the funniest. The poor statue that lost its head. That's all I'm going to say. It was a bad experiment. It was actually pretty good.
John Michael put it up for you.
That's nice. Did he? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you, John. All right, guys. So with that, I'm going to say, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself, and we'll see you next week.
It's freaking cold out
tomorrow, 3 Tortured Souls. We are going to be talking about the 21 grams experiment. We're going to dive into that and talk about the history and some of the things we found. I actually brought it up, and me, Tim, and Dave got together on StreamYard, a private chat, and it's something that I was supposed. It was going to be a 5-minute question, but it turned into like a 2-hour discussion, and all of us researching, and decided to be a cool topic to talk about. So check that out tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 Pacific. So with that, let me cue up the video, the ending video, and we will see you next week. And remember, never stop learning. Bye.
Bye, guys.